Bilmem.
Abi kaçak.
YouTube.
Abi Arda'nın bir sıkıntısı falan olmasın ya.
Bir Hollanda'da iş durumu var. Onunla uğraşıyorum abi dedi geçen.
Onu biliyorum da abi iş durumu da ne? Hollanda'da mı yaşıyor şu anda? Değil ki yani buralarda. Hiç ortalıkta yok. Raid'den raid'e giriyor. Bu aralar içimde bir SP oynama isteği var ya. Acaba Year yapabilir miyim ki SP? Eğer SP'yi halledebilirsem bir tane daha saçma sapan redden kurtulmuş oluruz.
Abone oldum. Aboneyim abone. Bir dakika önce başladı.
World of Warcraft for over a decade. I think it's safe to say that World of Warcraft has changed many of our lives. It actually led me to meeting my husband. Some of you may know him as Bajira. He's been hosting that PvP tournament over there. But it's also allowed us to share our love and passion for this game through content creation. And for that, I couldn't be more thankful. To say that I am beyond thrilled to be this year's moderator is a bit of an understatement. So as excited as I am, I know that you all are just as excited to get to the questions. We've had some amazing announcements about what to expect in this expansion, and I know I am excited to get into it. So let's meet our panelists who will be answering these questions. Let's have you introduce yourselves.
Alex Frasiabi, Creative Director.
I am Jalen Brack. I am the executive producer, and I am a WoW classic enthusiast.
Ian Hasikostas, I'm game director.
Chris Robinson, I'm the art director.
And I'm Matt Goss. I'm one of the lead game designers.
Thank you guys for being here. Are you prepared?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll see.
So as with previous years, over the past couple days, we have collected your questions from online, as well as from those of you here in attendance from the Dark Moon Fair. I know I am really looking forward to these. So we are going to take our first questions from the audience. Let's take it away.
Hi there, I play a warlock in AIE on Earth and Ring. I go by Ro. I have a question regarding warfronts. It's a two-part question. The first thing I'm wondering is the availability of warfronts. Is it going to be similar to, say, invasions, where they're only available for a period of time? Is it something that we can access whenever we want? And then along those lines, how will the reward system play into it? Will it be similar to rewards we see in other endgame content? Will there be a reason to motivate us to always do warfronts at least once a week? I would really like to know your philosophy on that.
So I think the easy thing to say is war is difficult, and it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of supplies, it takes a lot of resources to build up to. So I think there's going to be some downtime before the war breaks out, and there might be some time on the other side when it's settling down a little bit. So we're looking at it more of I hate to say event-based system because I think it's going to be up for longer than just a short amount of time. But it's going to be something you're going to build up to, you're going to have it, and then it's going to go back down on the other side. Now, for rewards, we're looking at all the other systems we do that are similar to that. So if you think about the way we reward time walking, the way we reward like the Legion invasions that you mentioned, that's kind of where we're going to go. We haven't nailed down exactly what we're going to do, so we don't have details yet for that. But I think it's in that kind of space where we'll have something really good for you to do at least once, and then we want you to keep doing it if you like it. The challenge with everything we do with rewards is if you like doing it, have reasons to do it. If you want to do something else, do the thing you really want to do. And so finding that balance, we might have a different philosophy a different way to do that goal, but that's the goal that we're going to have for it.
Interesting. So does that mean we will see possibly like PvP and PvE rewards when we do those, or is that still being worked out?
It's still being worked out. So again, Warfronts are PvE at launch. We have, I mean, I've seen a lot of buzz around, can we get PvP Warfronts?
Yeah.
So cool. And I mean, we love that too, but we're going to do PvE and we'll see where the rewards shake out. We might share some of the armor because it's, you know, PvP armor that we do usually has a very strong alliance and a very strong horde theme. This might be a case for where we make a really cool armor set. I think we actually may have shown in the art panel the Warfront sets that we made. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's go to our next question.
Hi, I'm Valdella from the Tribe Guild on Megatherodon, and we would like to see if we could possibly have basic reputations become account-wide. I realize exceptions like Bloodsail Admiral, things like that would not work, but all the old ones, we would love to have those be account-wide. Those of us with lots of vaults just don't have the time to grind out the rep on everybody.
Oh, we got some excited people about that.
I think it's always a balance to
Teyzenin sorduğu soru nasıl ama?
Account-based progression, because I think, and obviously, I'm just saying this as sort of devil's advocate here. We wouldn't actually do this, but if all rewards, if everything were account-wide, you could have alts, but what would your goals be on those alts? What would you be striving for? What would your rewards be? Now, obviously, rep is different from items and power, but the question I would ask when those situations arise is, what is it about those reps that makes you feel like you need them on multiple alts or on all your alts? So I think, you know, with content-based unlocks, for example, that's something we've definitely gone towards making account-wide. If you're getting access to content, if you're getting access to a dungeon, like in Suramar, or you're getting the improved flight whistle on Argus, those are things we don't want you to have to re-earn. That kind of defeats the purpose. But if it's, you know, you're working your way towards Revered so that you can buy a pattern that you want as a leatherworker, or you want a helmet from there, well, that's meant to be more of a power progression that is a separate set of goals. The same way you have to level up your trade skills, you have to get your gear. So I'd rather dig into what those things are and maybe uncouple things from reps that feel too burdensome or drive you towards repetitive behavior you're not enjoying.
Ours was mostly getting the gear, the specific things for the various classes. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, our next question.
Hi, I'm Nick, or Dilemmas from Illidan. My question is there any plans for a stat squish, and if so, what's it going to look like? Also, is Enduin a paladin officially?
Ooh, I think we saw that with the demos, right? Possible stat squish going on?
Stat squish, Ian will talk about. Anduin, 100% not a paladin. He is a priest.
Wow.
All right.
He's just a hero character, and hero characters can do things that normal priests cannot.
As for the stat squish, obviously any of you who checked out our playable demo here today, you probably noticed, or if you saw some of the screenshots from our panels, numbers were a lot smaller. Yes, we're doing another squish like we did in Warlords for all the same reasons. It's not changing your player power relative to the content that you're accustomed to do. The point isn't to nerf you, the point is to bring numbers back to a sane space. The one thing different this time around is that we're also squishing item levels. It's something we probably should have done the first time around in Warlords. Because we didn't, you might notice if you level a character on live, going from Wrath to Cataclysm, you might jump 100 item levels in what's on your item, but only get 2 or 3 points of stamina or something. It kind of undermines the meaning of what item level is supposed to be. We're bringing that down too.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. All right, we have...
Hi there, my name is Sparty. I'm the Guild Master of Death Jester, Zeros to Heroes, and Tauli. With the new communities coming out, we'll essentially have cross-guild chat. What does that mean for cross-faction chat, and what will be our options for communication in Battle for Azeroth?
So communities are still character-based, which means they're still faction-based. So yeah, you do get, you know, you can have your 2 communities in your guild, and you can talk between guilds now, but there's no cross-faction chat, and we don't have plans to do that. I mean, I think we're at war, right? I think Alliance and Horde are fighting,
And if you do want that, of course, you can do that at the BattleNet, at the battle tag level, right? If you make a battle tag group, then, and that will be integrated into the client, and you'll have the same access to it as you would your community chat. But the key thing there is that's player to player, like human being to human being, not orc warrior to human priest. Those two don't get along. Because part of the point of communities is also a structure built around shared gameplay, right? You have these around running dungeons or battlegrounds or raids or whatever else you're doing together, and by definition, Horde and Alliance players cannot do those things together.
All right, so you can still be a double agent on BattleNet app. All right, our next question.
Hi, I'm Zillions. I'm from Alpha on Whisperwind. We are still recruiting. Getting to my question, is there anything in the works that may help with guild recruitment?
The number of times we've talked about guild recruitment increases, it's nonstop each expansion. We don't have anything right now. What we really hope, like when we look at communities and when we're building the community system, we were hoping we could find social structures that were a little less, hard to get into, a little less friction to get into. So if you like playing with specific people, you can make a community, try it out, and if you like those people, maybe that becomes a new guild that you join. That's kind of the approach we're taking now. I think in the future, it comes up every time. I'm sure we'll look at it in the future too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next question.
Hello, my name is Rapukin, aka Team Fortress. Shoutouts to the guild Bloodshot on Prodmore Alliance. So my question is about the new leveling scaling. These days, a level 30 Legion character is a lot stronger than a level 30 Cataclysm character, say. You can kind of run around even without heirlooms and one-shot quest mobs. So my question is, with the new level scaling, will mob health and damage be rebalanced as well? And how will heirlooms be impacted by the new leveling process?
So there's a lot going on. So 735 level scaling, we've done some work to make it a little bit more sane. A lot of that is going back into items and giving them, items that aren't heirlooms, the same kind of power that they have, the same kind of power that they should have if they were a level 110 item, right? So using the item budget correctly. When we're looking at it for 8.0, I think we're looking a little bit more holistically about the tuning of the game and what kinds of things we can make better, the better experience. Like the one-shotting is, it's kind of fun, but it also kind of degrades the way that game used to be. So those things are what we're looking at. Heirlooms, still in debate, still talking about.
In a big way, I mean, like Matt just said, one of the hugest advantages heirlooms give you right now is that they're actually properly itemized in a world where there isn't other properly itemized gear to compare it to. So rather than nerfing heirlooms, I think we're often taking the approach of just making the other options better, shrinking that gap a bit, and then as we tune the scaling curve and combat times and pacing, the difference between a player with heirlooms and one without won't be nearly as big. Of course, you have the XP bonuses and those other things that are still a factor.
Thank you.
All right, our next question.
How you doing? I'm from Storm Rage Alliance, and shout out to the Mustard Squad. My question today is about the Heart of Azeroth, the new amulets coming up in Battle for Azeroth. During the What's Next panel, there was some discussion about the progression system and the ways that we would be powering it up. And you could draw some pretty clear parallels to the current artifacts in Legion and the artifact power system. Could you make any comments about the artifact power, artifact knowledge stuff, something you liked, disliked, and if it influenced any design decisions going forward?
There's a lot we like with artifacts. And I hope you guys liked it too. Like, we liked the choices. I think Russ talked about in the panel yesterday. The choices that you got to make early on were really cool, and we felt like that was a decision that we wanted you to make more and more of. And that's, coming from that, the Azerite armor, each piece giving you a little bit of progression and getting a new piece giving you some more progression. And again, more choices to make. For artifact power, I almost called it Azerite power. Shouldn't do that.
Same acronym.
It is. It's AP. I think the biggest takeaway was I'm not sure I like getting trillions of artifact power, and so that's one of the things that we're looking at ways to solve.
I think one of the big differences with artifacts, there's no question that having tons of items in your bag, it's pretty clunky. It's an unwieldy experience. We needed to do that with artifacts because there was a different artifact weapon for each spec that was a core part of the fantasy of what these weapons were, and we didn't want somebody who was primarily a Fury Warrior, but their friends needed a tank, saying, well, sorry, I don't really want to do that as prop because I want the artifact power for my Fury weapon, so we wanted you to be able to get it as an item, choose where to put it. With the amulet, there's only one for all your specs, and so we don't need the items, which means it can go right into your amulet right away. And when we don't have items anymore, it means we also don't need a way of, implementing knowledge in a way that makes the rewards constantly scale up more and more and more. Instead, imagine a version of knowledge that simply slightly reduces the amount of azurite you need to infuse into your amulet to get the next level, where a raid boss might always give you 200 azurite as a consistent value throughout the entire expansion, so you can easily compare the numbers, understand how rewarding something is, and you're not dealing with billions, let alone trillions.
Excellent.
Interesting.
Thank you.
So we'll be sticking with specific armor that the azurite will be going in, correct?
So the azurite doesn't go in the armor. The azurite is actually leveling up your amulet. And so
Okay.
the level of the medallion is what will determine how many powers on your armor you can access.
Okay.
But you're not making a permanent investment in your shoulders. Like if you have a pair of shoulders with 2 tiers unlocked and you get a different pair that has better traits, that will also automatically have those 2 tiers unlocked if they're comparable in item level. And so your progression is permanent, and it's more about the choices you're making as you get the gear.
That is awesome. Let's go to our next question.
Hi, I'm Novos from Team Toaster in Zeros to Heroes on Storm Rage. My question is, what was your thought process in deciding to bring back raid buffs like Arcane Intellect and Mark of the Wild?
So I think the short answer is we liked them. We thought they were cool. A lot of what we're looking at, there's a couple different things here. So first, there was something cool about that moment before you pull a boss and you get to see all of the buffs go out. That just kind of felt like, yeah, now we're ready. Right now you kind of sit down and eat some fish, and this was more a moment. So I think that was one. And then we're also, we're always looking at classes as, I bring something as my class that makes me feel special, and you bring something as your class that makes you feel special, and we like to have each other around. And that's something we're trying to find the right balance, because we don't want that to be a reason like you don't bring somebody to a raid. But at the same time, it's like, hey, if we can, if I'm a paladin, you're happy I'm a paladin. Or if I'm a warlock, you're happy that I'm a warlock because I provide this thing. Buffs are one way to do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question.
Hi. I'm sorry. I just came from the WoW arena.
It was wild.
Sounds like it was exciting.
I'm Jarisar from the Technically PvP podcast. Shout out to Sovereign Alliance on Sargeras. My co-host Winstead, and my girlfriend Melanie at home watching. How do you feel about PvP templates? And specifically, how do you respond to PvP players who miss getting to manage their own stats through gear choice, enchantments, reforging gems?
So there's a lot of, there's lots of unpack there. So we like the gameplay that talents provide, I think. We like having a little less power gap between the top tier itemized players and the lower tier. And I think that's really good with it. The problems that we have with it are, it's hard to put that in the outdoor world. When does it turn on? When does it turn off? So one of the things that contributes to world PvP balance being a little off.
A little is a slight understatement there. Just saying.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a problem.
It is a problem. So we're really looking. I think that's one thing. The other thing was itemization, being able to customize your character more. We knew that there was a problem before, and I think we might have oversolved it with both reducing the power gap and also taking away all choice and itemization. So we're trying to see, like, we're looking at the tech that we use to scale zones. We think we might be able to do something there for PvP, and where we can kind of take what character you have, squish the power level so that it's not quite as big in PvP combat, but it's not, this huge change where all your stats change, and if I'm wearing all master gear, suddenly I get all crit gear.
In principle, it's kind of the same approach that lets level 108 and level 105 player fight alongside each other against the same mob and has the combat work out. And the huge advantage of that is, even in the outdoor world, this would let us have a consistent rule set where it's never a situation where your template applies and all your stats change and you have different health than you're used to. We want your character to feel like your character, and for sure in an RPG, that means making choices about what you're wearing and what your stats are.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Just one quick follow-up to that, too. I think one of the things we're going to have to do when we do that is look at the reward structure of PvP as well, because I think it's really hard to get stats that you want right now given the structure that we have. So we're going to take a look at that too.
Yeah, I think it would offer a good sense of uniqueness. People would feel like they're making their own choices on what they want, which is really cool. So we had a question that was from the audience, but they couldn't make it here, and I thought it would be a good time to ask. But what do you guys think about Titan forging in the battle for Azeroth?
I think I've been asked this question around 20 times over the course of BlizzCon already, just wandering around the floor.
little passion.
So I think we're going to make tweaks, but not a fundamental change to the system. Sorry to those of you who are not fans, but the goal of this is to have variability in rewards. It's moments of excitement. It's if you think back to raids back in the old days, if you're working, let's say, pretend you're in Tomb of Sargeras, you're working on Fallen Avatar now. Your guild at this point has probably killed the first few bosses quite a number of times. Back in the day, if you were doing that farm content or that reclear to get to the boss you're on, except for maybe one item that you've been unlucky with, there really wasn't any hope for an upgrade for you on many of those nights, which also meant that collectively as a guild, your progress would stall, to say nothing of your own personal excitement. I think there's value in having upgrades out there, having moments of potential surprise. That said, a lot of the feeling of extreme spikes and randomness, obviously not great. So we may be taking a look at adjusting the odds and the ways in which the numbers of the system play out, but the core concept of the ability of an item to scale up in power, I think, is one that we want to continue with. However, this will not apply to the Azerite-infused or Azerite-attuned armor slots, so helm, shoulders, chest currently. Those already have plenty of complexity and depth to them without also adding this extra layer. So a mythic helm is a mythic helm is a mythic helm. It has those traits. Go after it. Don't worry about trying to get a Titan Forged version of the one from the last tier because it theoretically might be better. It won't be.
Very good. Let's go back to the audience.
Hi, I'm Ikael from Havoc on Uther and Wild Nox from Neverender on Thorium Brotherhood. And my question is, can character players get some sort of rooting effect for their characters to counteract pushback or knockback effects?
Oh.
So that's, I mean, obviously, you should all just race change to Goblin, then you can push Goblin rocket jump, and then no. There's some weirdness with the way knockbacks work and movement effects in terms of how they interact with other movement abilities. That specific example that you give, though, it's something we've actually talked about being a cool niche for Death Knights. Death Knights in particular, the old school Pillar of Frost approach, where maybe they're not the most fast-moving one, but when everyone around them gets knocked down, everyone around them gets pushed back, they should be able to hold their ground, and that could be something that we expand upon in the Death Knight space.
Thank you. Very cool. Let's take our next question.
Hi guys, I'm Misha, or Skeletons. I'm from Oblivion's Dawn. I'm a raider on Wimmer's Accord. And I've been playing this game since I was a little kid in Russia. So what my question for you guys is, World of Warcraft is an MMORPG. So what do you guys plan doing about a character creation system that feels so archaic and lackluster in comparison to other RPGs?
So, first of all, I agree with your assessment. And, at this point, it's just a matter of, it feels like we haven't been responding to that comment. And there's a reason for that, being that we knew we were going to be doing allied races at some point, and when we took a look at the options that currently existed with, and this is just to speak to like hair and some of the existing options, we wanted to take a look at what we were going to do with allied races before we decided to add a bunch of things to the existing races. Having said that, we're at a point now where we have a good grip on that. I think we're going to take a really strong look at what we need to do to improve that system and make some change in that area.
Some more character customization, it sounds like?
Yes, absolutely.
Very awesome.
What about posture?
I like it.
Any posture-related options in the
So yeah, that's
space?
a big one, right? Like we've been asked for quite a while about upright orcs and why hero orcs are different than hunched orcs. At this point, we are going to add that. So in 8.0, in Character Create, you will be able to choose between an upright orc and a hunched over orc.
Wow. Nice.
if you have an existing orc, you'll be able to go to the barber shop, and there's a toggle switch that you can toggle on or off. So you can turn into, I guess you can go see that chiropractor.
It's basically barber / cosmetic surgeon / chiropractor. Multi-talented fellow.
And just as a side note to that, it opens up some exciting doors for us because we'll be able to now have shared animation on one rig. So looking forward in the future, there will be a lot more that we will be able to do with new characters coming up.
Very awesome. I like it. Let's take our next question.
Hello, my name's Colton, aka Darlassi on Sargeras. I main a Disc Priest, shout out the Praetian Guard. Now my question is, in the Battle of Azeroth, is Jaina actually a good guy? I mean, are we just supposed to forget the whole genocide of Dalaran?
Jaina's complicated, just like any other character. She's as evil as I am. Bad example.
How evil are you?
That's these guys. So look, if I'm Jaina, right? As a character, Jaina is racked with regret, right? Looking over her past decisions and the things that she's done, responsible for the death of her father, potentially responsible for what the Horde is today as a result of that. What could she have done differently at Stratholme? Could she have saved Arthas? What about the battle for Undercity? So if you kind of unpack all of that and break all of those things apart, it's left a character that has some damage. And then not even speaking of Theramore. So one of the things we're going to do is explore that damage, explore those decisions with Jaina, and try to understand how she got to be the way she is, and hopefully pull her out of it. So no, she's not evil. She's conflicted, and it's something we absolutely want to explore.
Wow. I can't wait for that. Let's take our next question.
Hello, I'm Druki, Guildmaster of Timeless on Executus. I'm the guy that wants ducks in the game because there's a lack of quack. Have you ever looked up in a raid and noticed how many bosses have a hole in their ceiling? Why do so many bosses have holes in their ceilings?
They do. They do.
So that's an interesting question. I think there's multiple reasons for that. I mean, functionally, it opens up the opportunity for no camera collision. If you're, in an area that has a low ceiling, you're not going to have the camera bumping around on the ceiling. That's the functional reason. I think aesthetically, we look at, it's always nice to tie those locations into real-world locations. So you don't go into a raid or, a dungeon and kind of feel like you're off in the nether somewhere and not rooted in that zone that you started in. So from an aesthetic perspective, it allows us the opportunity to kind of show the outside world while you're in that environment without having windows or things that look out to the horizon. So it really is just kind of a combination of, like, when it makes sense, we do it. It offers the ability to have different color schemes, to introduce different colors in those environments. But there's no one reason I can tell you and go, it's because they don't like ceiling fans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take our next question.
Hi there, my name is Grant, also Nimitz on Storm Rage. And my question is, with the Horde attacking Teldrassil and the Alliance attacking Lordaeron, what are your plans for the starting zones in those areas, and also just some of the other leveling zones in the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor?
Starting zones aren't going to change. Leveling in the flow of time, we'll make improvements. But in order to appreciate the burning of Teldrassil, you kind of have to understand what Teldrassil is first, right? And the way time works in our games, it flows by level. So you'll still be able to start in Shadowglen, go to Dolinar, Darnassus, Darkshore, go through all of that, and then when you hit 120, we'll burn it all down.
Probably
110.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Same thing for Lordaeron and what happens there. You'll still make a character in Death Knell and go through all of those cool experiences and get to play as a quest giver and all that other fun stuff. And then we'll see what happens. But once you do get to that point in Battle for Azeroth where these events have occurred, the land around you will, of course, change. And potentially more, right? We've got a warfront in Arathi that, who knows what'll happen there.
It sounds pretty
Thank you.
immersive, actually. Keeping a good storyline going with that. I like that a lot. All right, let's go to our next question.
my name's Carrie. I'm one of the officers in the Cult of El Pollo Grande, which is Dredden's #1 chicken cult. It's a thing. I had a question about Void Elves. So in-game, Illyria seems to be able to shift back and forth from Void Elf to High Elf form. Will playable Void Elves be stuck in Void Elf form, and why?
No. They will not. I don't want to say it's going to be a transformation like Metamorphosis. It's not quite at that level. We're tweaking that right now. They absolutely have a void form. It's just a matter of how it's invoked. And we definitely don't want you to be fully voided the entire time because, the details are important. So we'll see.
Something possibly passive, sort of Shadow Priest,
Yeah, I mean,
but just kind of on its own accord.
Well, right now, when they go into combat, they'll void out, but we may pull that back. We may make it activatable. We'll play with it in beta.
I like it. Thank you. Our next question?
Hey guys, I'm Scrib from Warmrest Accord. For the last year, I've been raid leading a guild called the Archives. Shout out to anyone who was a part of that. Lately, I've been having to keep pushing people to grind out old tier gear, old trinkets, all sorts of things to have to Titan Forge them because they're always the best. What do you guys plan on doing for this to combat that when you're moving forward into the next expansion?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think the first thing we look at is, how the rate that Titan Forging is happening. That's the rate that Warforging is happening. But I think really we've gotten a lot better through the patches at actually balancing items against each other. And I think that's something we continue to look at as being a very important thing. Like item level should win. And a lot of times that people are fishing for old things. It's things that might be a little out of budget, like the Arcano Crystal. I heard it. Maybe we'll stabilize it in 8.0. We're not sure yet. Could be stabilized then. But we really want to get those into a space where we can predict where they are, and then make sure that using other systems like we have with Azerite Armor, where Azerite Armor doesn't Titan Forge, so you're not going to have to go back to get it. Hopefully that's a big burden off your shoulders when that goes live as well. So
I think a couple of other aspects to that. I mean, part of the trinkets thing is also just the relinquished system, and so you're not necessarily going back and actually killing the old bosses. It's more just part of your reward for doing the more recent content from that large pool of items. But separately, we definitely had some issues with the secondary stat balance, and that's obviously the Arcana Crystal problem as well as a number of others. And it's hard to fix mid-expansion given the curve that we committed to, but in general, we'd like to do a whole lot more to make item level more consistently determinative of what's going to be worth using and to avoid huge outliers that aren't intended like that.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we had another question from an audience member who couldn't make it, but I decided it might be a good time to ask it. So with the new Old World Zone and dungeon scaling, what are your thoughts about adding Mythic Keystone difficulties to old dungeons?
It's an interesting idea. I think time walking is something that we continue to expand. We expanded in breadth and depth. We've added new expansions, and then more recently started to add raids as another layer. Certainly for people who like the dungeon side of the gameplay, going back and doing the heroic dungeons via the random queue, not necessarily the most challenging experience, especially for those of you who are experienced pushing high-level Mythic Keystones. That could be a fun place to explore with some sort of time-walking keystone that's available during those respective weeks. It's a cool idea.
That's really cool. Let's go back to our audience.
Hi, I'm Pronk with Harvesters of Sorrow on Misha. You guys have been asked a lot of thoughtful, challenging questions, and you're about to get a break from that. My question is, once the expansion's out, how soon will we be flying?
Oh, softballs.
Yeah.
As the honorary flying responder, I think honestly about the same as Legion. I think, and we're pretty happy with how that system has played out overall. The way that worked out on Argus was as much a product of the environment as anything else, rather than any overriding design philosophy we had. If Argus had just been another zone right next to the Broken Isles, flight wouldn't have been the same issue there. But exploring the world, getting to know the nooks and crannies, the mountains, the shortcuts, the details of each experience that you have in a zone, it just works out better when you're exploring it on the ground initially. But we understand that in the long run, there's a lot of convenience, especially as you get to leveling alts, especially as you've pretty much seen all the nooks and crannies a number of times. You want to be able to skip over them and skip past them. Unlocking the ability to fly is a great reward to work towards. And I think looking at the number of people who've earned flying in Legion, it wasn't something that was very hard to acquire. It's just a matter of having that experience the content one time through from the ground, and then you can soar in the skies above it. Thanks.
I have to say, I actually love really exploring the ground time, so having that time to be able to do that, thank you for doing that, holding it off for just a little bit. But
you're welcome.
So let's go to our next question.
Hi, I'm Zensu Nim, and I'm the author of the GTFO add-on. And I...
Hey!
And I'm actually a huge fan of the WoW Legion companion app, and I'm wondering what's the future look like for mobile apps moving forward?
So yeah, I think we're also huge fans of it, and being able to stay in touch with aspects of your character while you're on the go, while you're away, there's a lot of value, a lot of coolness there. It's something we want to keep building upon and enhancing in the future. We also recognize it's not necessarily the most convenient thing for people who have to bounce back and forth between that and the mobile Armory app. We'd like to work towards rolling those two into one cohesive experience as we look to the future.
Awesome. Let's take our next question.
Hello, I'm Vornath, Warlock on Zul'jin. Shout out to my brother and nephews watching at home.
Aww.
And my question is about time walking. I think it's been a great addition to the game, but as more and more time walking events have been added, and as I assume in the future more will continue to come, it's been getting longer and longer for the specific time walking event you want to come around. So I'm wondering if there's any chance of any kind of consolidation to maybe we'll just get one time walking event which they'll all be active or something along those lines.
Interesting.
But I think some consolidation, I don't know that we would go to all at once. I think there is some value to looking forward to, when Wrath's going to come around again or when Kata's going to come around again. Those dungeons are, they're a nice experience, they're a nice change of pace from what's there in the modern game, but not necessarily ones that you want to be running all the time. As we continue to expand time walking, most of that expanding really is added depth to the existing holidays. We'll probably add Warlord's time walking at some point during Battle for Azeroth. That seems like a safe bet. But beyond that, it's more some of the stuff that was touched on in earlier questions. What other types of activities can happen during a given time walking week? Are there ways that we could bring the outdoor world into this as well? So it's not just about an instanced experience. That could be another cool space to explore.
Thank you.
Very cool. Next question.
Hi, my name is Joey Giggles. I am a healing monk. We're very rare on Alliance Manaroth. So with allied races being added, I gotta say the Zandalari trolls look amazing. And I am really close to think about switching to Horde.
For the Horde?
With that being said, Faction Pride is it's an ongoing struggle, and so is faction balance. So how do you keep Alliance playing Alliance and Horde playing Horde so that doesn't become more of an issue?
I mean, it sounds like you might want to look within yourself, and if you're looking at that Zandalari troll, and there's something there that speaks to you, maybe that's your answer. At the end of the day, right, that's a choice everybody has to make, and play the game the way you want to play it. I think in terms of faction balance on servers, across the game as a whole, we've made a lot of improvements over the years, whether it's cross-realm auction houses as more of a default, or improved matchmaking across servers so that you can find people to play with regardless, to help address things on those levels. But play what you want to play.
I like that. I think the other thing I want to add to that is in one of your previous panels you were talking about the PvP toggling, and I feel like that's going to give a lot of faction pride because you can be with your group doing that.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right, our next question.
Hi, I'm Dimination from Revive on Storm Reaver. My question is, what are your plans for legendaries come Battle for Azeroth?
So we we have Azerite armor, and Azerite armor in a lot of ways already kind of does what legendaries did in Legion. So we're not looking forward. We're not actually taking that system forward into 8.0. I don't know about the future past that, but I think you see a lot of the we looked at the legendaries that the people like and the choices that they were able to make, and kind of wrap that into what was cool about Azerite armor, and took kind of lessons from artifacts. We took lessons from legendaries, so they don't really seem necessary in their current form in 8.0.
Thank you.
Yep.
I like that. Our next question.
I'm Nairo from Drengen Horde. Shout out to my guild. You can't fix stupid. So what's going on with the quest log size limit? Can we increase it a lot?
A lot. Please? Just moderately increase it.
In the realm of things we talk about all the time, I think this comes up quite a bit too. The hard part is, I think there's a lot of things to look at with the quest log size. I think we have a lot of quests that are ending up in your log right now that probably don't need to be there. Maybe they can be somewhere else. Maybe they don't need to live there for so long. I think you kind of end up accumulating, I was looking at my log recently. I had about 20 quests, and most of them I don't remember picking up because they were, I was getting mission rewards, or I was flying through areas and getting quests pushed to me. So I think we're going to attack that first. When you have 25 quests in your log, it's really hard to keep track of all of them. If we added up to 35 or 50 or whatever you guys are asking for, I think it would still be overwhelming, and you'd end up being like, okay, well, I still have now 50, and now I have to go through and figure out what things I don't want to do. We'd rather you didn't have to choose between quests that you want to do and quests that you don't want to do, and try to attack that first.
I like it.
Right.
All right, let's do our next question.
I'm Rar.
Hi, Rar.
Hi.
Sorry. Night Elf Druid on Greymane. My question is about the default backpack. When will hoarders have more space?
Please.
Members of the Alliance and the Horde, we hear you. We are very close to allowing you to slightly increase your backpack size. One of the things that we want to do is we want to incentivize you to use the authenticator. And so at some future patch, if you have an authenticator attached to your account, your backpack size will increase.
What? That is great. Thank you, guys. All right, our next question.
Hi, my name is Luke, and I raid with my guild Easy Play on ECRAU. And as we're raiding, and with the faction conflict taking center stage, I was wondering if we can even see different raid bosses for the factions, or are we going to see different stories or different reasons why we're in raids?
Ooh.
So definitely different stories, different reasons for a lot of these places. Your purpose going into a Taldazar or a place in Nazmir as a Horde player will be quite different from what you're hoping to accomplish in terms of the wrapping and the context for it as an Alliance player. The bosses are the bosses, the place is the place, but different reasons to do the same things. Now, looking further ahead, we talked a bit about some of the raids that we have planned, and those are again tied to the storylines of these new subcontinents. But there's no reason at all why faction conflict, true faction conflict, can't play out in a raid setting or a dungeon setting. If I'm Alliance and Horde is the enemy, then shouldn't I be raiding the Horde? And shouldn't a raid boss be a member of the Horde? It's a cool place to explore.
We should burn down Stormwind. I agree.
Thank you.
I really liked even going back to Wrath at the Trial of the Crusader, where we had a very similar kind of PvP-esque boss instance. And so to see something like that, maybe would be pretty cool again.
Yeah. Bring back faction champions.
All right, our next question.
All right, I'm Clevis from Onslaught.
and my question is regarding World of Warcraft Classic. And I'm wondering, do you plan to fix the bugs, exploits, and other issues that we may or may not remember from Vanilla WoW? Or do you have a philosophy at this point of warts and all to get that authentic experience?
That's a really good question, and it's a complicated one. So, I think part of the reason, one of the things we talked about in the announcement was that this is going to take a little bit longer than maybe you might imagine. And part of that is to engage with you guys, the community, to talk about some of these concerns and talk about some of these issues. I think our philosophy is, to have a compass heading that is to recreate the level 1 through 60 experience as you remember it. I think there were bugs and exploits that led to crashes and led to service downtime. Obviously, we don't want that to be part of the experience. But there are going to be some questions that are going to be really interesting that we're going to have to answer in terms of how things worked at certain points during the 2 years that the original 1 through 60 experience existed. And, there's all kinds of things that come to mind, but the one I'll bring up is Ubers, right? Like Ubers for a lot of the time was both a 10-player instance and a 5-player instance. And then as we get close to releasing Burning Crusade, we got rid of the 10-player instance. What's the right version of Classic? That's something that we have to talk about for sure.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thanks.
Let's go to our next question.
Hi, Pyro from Crescendo on Area 52. My question is, the allied races look amazing, and their heritage armor looks amazing. If I unlock the heritage armor on a Nightborn, can I then transmog it on my Blood Elf?
Nope. Yeah, sorry.
Kidding. No.
Next question.
Yeah.
No, the heritage armor is the unique expression, is the essence of that allied race's identity, and it's for them and them alone.
They can't just share closets or something? Nothing?
Sorry. Doesn't work that way.
Looks like we're going to be leveling a few, huh?
Thank you.
All right, our next question.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you for all you guys do. Jay, you think we do, and we do. The question is regarding all the new social things that you guys are implementing. When are we going to see an increase to our friends limit? Because I've had 200 friends for like the last 10 years.
Okay, that's not true because the limit used to be 100.
I have a list that I have to keep adding and taking people off.
Yeah, so I agree, and especially as we've continued to increase the amount of social systems and the amount of different games that are available for you, the amount of friends that we need to support also needs to increase greatly. And so I can't talk about. So one of the challenges with this is every game has to do some work in order to kind of do this simultaneously. There's work on the BattleNet side. There's work on each individual game in order to kind of do this. So it's a more complicated thing than you might imagine, but it absolutely is something that we need to do and make significantly larger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Our next question.
Hi there, my name is Reckles with One to Buy Gold, and I have a question about gold making.
Ooh.
So I'm really nervous about item scaling, and I'll try to do an example so I'm clear. If I'm trying to farm like a level 63 shoulder, I need to go out and kill a level 63 enemy in Outlands. If I can get it from a 64, but the drop rate cuts in half. Well, now y'all are saying that these zones are going to go all the way to 80. How is the loot drop rate system changing? What are y'all doing? How is it going to affect us going forward?
He's a transmog collector for sure.
Yeah,
he's a gold collector.
I just sell him.
Yeah, so we talk about Classic and how hard it is to go back to that. Like scaling zones is kind of going back through 12 years of history and trying to figure out how all of this works in that system. Specifically with this, our philosophy is basically if the thing dropped it before, it's going to keep dropping it. So things that like gold will scale. It makes sense for gold to scale. If I'm doing a zone at 60, I should get the same amount of gold out of it. But if it's dropped, let's say it drops silk, it should still drop silk when we do our changes. That may not be 100% true based off of just some weird things that we might run into, but that's our philosophy that we're going with.
All right. Next question.
Thank you.
I'm Zakul from Storm Rage. Shout out to Zeros to Heroes, third shift, best shift. My question was on the war fronts and specifically on their length. I was wondering if they're going to be a longer experience, kind of like a raid. Are they something you can just jump into and do? Are our raid leaders going to yell at us if we're in one 30 minutes before raid? I was just wondering if you could elaborate on how long they're going to be and how you came to their length.
So some of that is really TBD at this point. Like we have, we think they're going to be a little bit longer than dungeons, but how far past that is still up in the air. Because I mean, there's a lot of pacing that goes along with it. You're building buildings, right? You're training troops. You want those troops to matter for at least a little bit of time. So it's still something that we're trying to dial in, and through our playtest, I think we'll find something. And I'm sure it's something that when you guys get it in beta, we'll get a lot of feedback and be able to adjust off of that too.
Okay, thank you.
Very cool.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So it looks like we have gone through a lot of audience questions so far, and we haven't even touched our online questions.
Oh, wow.
So I think we need to take a couple, if we can, from online. And our first question was, what classes will be available to each allied race, and will they differ from the current races? Why or why not?
So there's an interesting aspect of that question. So these are allied races. These aren't sub-races. There's no direct associated race or parent race or anything like that. So when we are approaching what a new allied race should be able to play, we're looking at the identity and the culture of that race and what makes sense, the same way we would with any new race we're adding to the game. We're going to go through that process. Where possible, err on the side of letting you play as much as possible, because we want those options. If you love a class and you love a race, we want to try to make it happen if it makes sense. Something like a Void Elf Paladin, not quite. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's sort of the logic and how we're approaching it. I believe the race class matrices for Void Elves, Lightforged, High Mountain, and Nightborn are up on the website right now for Battle for Azeroth, and we'll have more information to share on others in the future.
All right. And back to that, we actually had another viewer want a little bit of an explanation between how the Void Elves are Alliance and the Nightborn are Horde, and how is it not the other way around, or what's going on with that?
You're going to have to play the Battle for Azeroth to find out, because all the allied races have their own introductory quests, and we really want to make sure that you have context as players as to that exact question. Hey, why did the Nightborn go to the Horde and not the Alliance? Why did the Void Elves go to the Alliance and not the... We'll explain all of that, and that will be made very clear, and that will give you that sense of alliance, allegiance.
All right. Another viewer would like to know, will the Legion threat end before the Battle of Azeroth, for Azeroth, and what does that mean for the purpose of the Demon Hunter class?
Oh.
They just turn into hunters?
Yeah.
Yeah?
That's pretty much
Just regular hunters?
Hunter's nothing without
Take
the
up
hunt?
a bow and arrow and call it good?
It's a serious question, though, right? Look, their main purpose has been thwarted, right? The reason they exist. But not really. I mean, ultimately, demon hunters are blood elves and night elves. And they're doing what they do for the same reason Illidan was, right? Which is to protect the world that he loves. And the threat to that world hasn't stopped. If anything, it's getting crazier in the post-Legion world, where we've got a world that's damaged and potentially dying. So their charge is not over. They will continue to be demon hunters, and I would argue that one day we'll probably see demons again. So we'll need them.
All right. Another viewer would like to know, are the continents of Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdom completely split between the factions? And what does that mean for places like Silvermoon City and Exodar still?
Well, Silvermoon and Exodar are still Alliance and Horde, respectively. It's those zone boundaries are very tricky for NPCs to cross. So they can't. They don't even know. We will have a fictional. We will have fiction in place. Obviously, Those two kind of become the last bastions of their factions, and maybe a way in for those factions as well. And we'll be sure to use them in this battle.
Very cool. And our next viewer would like to know, when are we going to see updated Worgen and Goblin character models?
Oh.
Please.
So apparently that's something that people want, I guess.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
So actually, Ian and I have been trolling each other all weekend, saying opposite things for some odd reason. So just to clear things up, not for Ado, but we are actually currently working on them. And no disrespect meant to either of those races for the delay it's taken us to get to that. I play a Goblin. We love those guys. I feel like the Goblin, and I think collectively we feel like the Goblin as a race are looking really good and really cool, both the male and female. They just need that visual update and more animation so they feel like they're in line with the current fidelity of the rest of the races. So Worgen, on the other hand, very happy with the male Worgen. I understand there's also a lot of unhappiness with the female Worgen, so as part of that process we would like to offer more facial features for them so they feel a little bit softer or more wolf-like and less chihuahua-like.
They're just sassy. All right. Our next viewer would like to know, in the future, when we opt in for World PvP, what will be the draw for that, and how do you figure out the reward level to incentivize that?
That's going to be a challenging process, but it's an important one. So as mentioned at the panel, the idea is to offer some increased efficiency to offset the natural inefficiency that comes from questing in a PvP environment. Even if you're the one doing the ganking and you're winning all your fights, that's still slowing you down compared to somebody who is just questing with no distractions. And we don't want people who love PvP to feel like they're hamstringing themselves playing the way they enjoy. And so the point of these bonuses will be to offset that inefficiency. Obviously, if we go too far, the risk would be pressuring players who don't like PvP and don't feel comfortable doing it into a playstyle they don't enjoy because it seems so lucrative. So those are the philosophies that are guiding us. Finding those exact values is going to be a process of reflection and tuning and feedback and hearing from all of you.
And when you're switching yourself to PvP, you do it in a major city. It doesn't happen in like a zone town, in a...
Yes, that's essential, right? So you'd have to be in a major capital like Stormwind or Orgrimmar or Dalaran, and you're making a choice that's not an easy to switch one. When you go out into the world, you're committing to that. It's not a thing to just bounce back and forth as the mood strikes you.
Right, and then you're phased. You don't see any of the PvE people out there. You don't see anything like that?
Exactly. Effectively, you are on a PvP server when you set out into the world, and if you make the other choice, you're on a PvE server when you set out into the world with most of the familiar rule sets. But again, that's a foundation that we can build upon to create all new content and really improve world PvP significantly.
Great, I like it. All right, our next viewer online would like to know, can we please have more character slots per realm?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, so I think...
we did it!
Thanks. So I think along with allied races, with Battle for Azeroth, we'll be giving you 6 additional ones because there's 6 allied races to unlock. And if you have your characters maxed out on a given server, we don't want you to have to feel like you need to delete a character in order to create the race that you've just unlocked. So similar to when we added the Demon Hunter, we gave a character slot. Similar story here.
Very cool. All right, our next... I'm excited for that, actually. But our next question is the unlockable heritage armor only going... Oh, I think we kind of answered this, but... so it's only going to be usable on the respective allied race, correct? You can't use it on any other class or anything like that. It's not account-wide.
That is correct. And part of the reason for that, aside from just to, I guess, another follow-up, aside from how important it is for that race's heritage, just gameplay-wise, we wouldn't want you to feel like if you want to collect cool transmogs that you need to make a race that you have no interest in playing, level it all the way to max level, and then throw it away just to get this one look. You should play it because you want to play it because you think the race is cool.
Very good. All right, and then our next viewer would like to know, with your renewed focus on the cross-server communities, will we be able to trade flasks with our friends on other realms or consumables, things like that?
This is, something else we're looking into. We need to figure out a way to do it so that it doesn't also cause weird economy issues between servers, and I think that's the challenge that we've been going with. But we all have, I think with cross-realm raiding being such a success, and I think you end up with 1 or 2 people in your, or maybe your entire raid is from different servers, it gets weird that you can't trade those things. We do also do things like we have feasts which work cross server. We have cauldrons that work cross server, so that might be another way to do it. But I honestly we'd love to find a way that you could trade those kinds of commodities without ruining economies that are different across each server.
Yeah. All right, and I think we have time for one more question. This one's pretty important. How or when do we sign up for the beta?
There's actually a web page that we put up that has all of the features for Battle for Azeroth. It's got details, and Ian mentioned the different classes that are available for four of the different allied races. That's actually up right down at the very top. It has a place for you to watch the cinematic and watch the intro features, and also sign up for the beta and get updates on when public testing begins.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, that's going to wrap up this year's Battle for Azeroth Q&A panel. I want to thank you guys so much for being here and giving us a lot of this valuable insight.
Thank you all for the great questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me as moderator. But more importantly, thank you guys. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching on the virtual ticket. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you for attending World of
Aman.
Yok, Q&A izlemedim. Sonra izleyeceğim. Red Shirt Guy çıktı mı? Bir tane Red Shirt Guy var. Kırmızı tişörtlü adam. Her sene BlizzCon'a gelip sorularıyla terletiyor.
So how's your BlizzCon? If you're a little louder, we'll just do an extra day of BlizzCon. What do you say? Okay, I'll run that past executive management, see if we can pull that off. Anyway, I really appreciate you coming and joining us. This is a big experiment for us because we've never done this. We've had a lot of people ask us, gee, what does a designer do? How do you guys put together bosses for these encounters? And so we wanted to share with you kind of a peek behind the curtains while we're going to do this live. So,
Oğlum ceza alacağım, bir şey alacaksın yani.
Hopefully you've already gone down to play at our demo area. If you haven't,
ne bileyim adamların content stealer yapıyorsun yani.
Great dungeons down there, but we've got 8 more to do. So tonight we're going to be designing a boss that will appear in Battle for Azeroth. So, yeah. So I'm your moderator, John Haidt. So you're not going to hear any ideas from me. So, but I want to introduce some of the rest of the folks here. Ken Huang is actually going to be designing the boss. So it's his job.
Bu mu tasarlamış? Abi bu belli ya. Bu örümcekleri falan da bu tasarlamış ama. Beni siktiğim ya, tövbe estağfurullah. Şey bu tasarlamış, ben sanıyorum Nazak Tıfiyendi bu tasarlamış mesela. Alın feryadı ya. Kapattım ya. Gıcık. Ciddi misin? Helal.
Scott Gordon. Candace Thomas. Johnny Cash. And this guy, reaching out to community is super important for us in tuning our bosses, getting good feedback. And so we've invited Ted Sloot Paczynski to join us tonight. Ted recently did shoutcasting for us at our Mythic Dungeon Invitational. We loved what he did, so we wanted his input tonight. All right, so Morgan, tell us about dungeon creation. How's it go?
All right, so today we're here to brainstorm a dungeon boss. But before we get into that, we wanted to take a couple minutes to provide you guys with some context and give you a look behind the scenes as to what our process looks like and how we got to where we are today. So the first thing we have to do when we're creating a new dungeon is we have the pre-production meeting. This is a pretty small meeting where we just have a couple of people where we try to establish a few things. Things like, what's the setting of this location? Is this a haunted manor on the top of the hill like our dungeon in Dressfar? Or is this like what we're talking about today? Or it's more of an exterior space where you walk across a cliff face? Additionally, we have to talk about things like, what's the story, right? What's my motivation? Why are we coming in here? What was the purpose of this place before we showed up? And most importantly, for today, what is the boss list, right? What are we going in there to punch? Coming out of that meeting, we always know exactly who the end boss is going to be, but we often have to figure out some of the supporting cast later on. But really, the goal of that meeting is to come out of it with enough information to create a 2D layout. After we've iterated on that layout a little bit, we're ready to have what we call the art kickoff meeting. This is where we get all of the stakeholders who are going to be building and creating and bringing this dungeon to life into a room, and we have a bit of a brainstorm. I call it a brain dump, really. We just kind of talk about all the information that's come up to that point. And we do a lot of brainstorming in there too to discuss, like, what's the purpose of this room? What is in this area? What would this boss be in? After we have that meeting, we're ready to go into full-blown production at that point. A few weeks later, we should have a 3D blockout that we can put into the game and actually start running around in and placing creatures and bosses. And at that point, we're ready to get the rest of the team, the encounter team up here involved. and have a similar meeting where we discuss the ecology of the dungeon and the bosses in there. We're not ready for brainstorming at that point for the mechanics and abilities, but really we're just talking about like, what are the actual bosses, right? What is this thing that I'm punching? Is it a big sea creature or what is it? We really want this group to be geeked out about what we're building, so we often kick around ideas in there because at the end of the day, these are the guys that have to implement these bosses, like Ken is implementing the one that we're going to be talking about today. So that brings us to where we are today, where we're ready to do brainstorming, and to help us out with that, I brought Mr. Johnny Cash, who is the quest designer on the zone where our dungeon takes place, Storm Song Valley. So Johnny, why don't you tell us a little bit about the zone?
Sure, thanks Morgan. So I'm a quest designer, like Morgan said, and so something you might be wondering is, hey, what's a quest designer doing on a panel full of encounter designers to make a dungeon boss? I'm usually more responsible for the outdoor content that, it takes place in Storm Song Valley proper. Well, they bring me into the meeting to provide the story context for what we're building. So anytime we're building any dungeon boss or raid boss or anything like that, we're going to bring in a quest designer to give us the context of the zone that this instance takes place in, and what happens there, as well as the story of the dungeon itself, so that when we actually get to creating the boss, we're making really informed decisions, and we're making a boss that really sells the theme and story of the area it takes place in. So let's talk a bit about Storm Song Valley. You might remember from the Wow What's Next panel that Storm Song Valley is the northernmost region of Kultiris, so it's one of our alliance zones for the expansion. In my opinion, it's also the prettiest zone in the expansion, which is kind of nice. So what's in Storm Song Valley? Storm Song Valley is kind of this idyllic workplace for the Kultirans. In Storm Song Valley, you see a lot of tradesmen, farmers, beekeepers, and most importantly of all, shipwrights. Kultiran culture is based heavily around their navy and their fishermen and sea life. And Storm Song Valley is where the lion's share of ships in Kultiris are made. So you might be wondering, the Alliance is probably pretty interested in this, right? With the battle for Azeroth looming and the different continents divided by a vast ocean. But why exactly are we interested in the Kultiran Navy? They have ships, but so do we, right? We have a shipyard in Stormwind. We've built ships over the years, so why do we want Stormsongs? Well, the Stormsong Valley is home to something that makes Kultiran ships very different than the ships we've seen before in Warcraft. House Stormsong is the dominant military power in the valley, and they have a secretive group of powerful casters known as Sea Priests. Now, Sea Priests are something that we've never seen before in Warcraft. They actually have magical dominion over the ocean. So they're controlling the water, they're controlling the storms, they're controlling the wind. And what they do to every single ship that's created in Kultiris, regardless of where it's made, they all pass through their stronghold to be blessed by the Sea Priests. And that magical, the runic binding on every single vessel is what makes them unlike anything we've ever seen in Warcraft before.
Druidlere bir şey getirmişler. Baykuş formuna geçince bir baykuş sesi
Shrine of the Storm. And that is also where our dungeon takes place today. Now, this is a really cool concept piece, and you can actually see it in-game today. So we're coming really far along, making a lot of really great progress on bringing this space to life so that we can fill it with bosses. Now, I won't spoil the story for the zone, but know this. Stormsong Valley is a very idyllic land, but there's dark secrets and dark forces at play beneath its rolling hills. And you will uncover that as you play through the zone's content, inevitably leading you into the Shrine of the Storm to do our dungeon experience for today. And so, let's get to the boss, right? That's what we're all here for. Our boss is an embodiment of the sea's fury itself, an enormous water elemental, bigger than any we've ever encountered before, and brimming with the very power that the Sea Priests have at their disposal. And we'll get to his abilities in just a minute. But first, let's go to Scott to talk about the space this guy is in and how we actually put the dungeon layout together.
Thanks, Johnny. As Morgan said earlier, one of the very first things we do when designing a dungeon is create a layout for it. This is it's like a blueprint for the zone. Because we draw this out on paper and it's a 2D image, we're able to iterate on it very quickly. We can change the layout of the rooms. We can decide if there are multiple floors. Do we start in a hallway or a chapel or things like that? Once we figured all this out, we can give this blueprint to artists and designers, and they have something to start on when they're building the zone. In the case of the dungeon we're talking about today, Shrine of the Storms, with this really cool concept piece that one of our concept artists made. And when we saw this, we were immediately inspired, and we got really excited and geeked up about going along the cliffs underneath the Kraken and walking across the bridge and actually seeing the dungeon take place around it. So with that in mind, we created this layout that we're going to show you right now. So in this layout, we start in the bottom of the zone along a sea bluff or a cliff, and we walk underneath the Kraken motif up to the area where we're going to fight the first boss. That's the boss we're going to talk about today, and we're going to design. Once players defeat this boss, they can walk across the bridge, and they get a better view of the motif from the front, and they'll face a second boss in an area where they have tons of fountains, and it's where they cleanse themselves before entering the chapel. Finally, they'll walk across the bridge underneath the Kraken tentacles that are wrapped around the bridge itself, and you enter their actual cathedral where they perform these rituals on these ships. So with that in mind, we can start talking about the boss.
So 2 things real quick before we start brainstorming the boss. With you guys our only rule during our brainstorms, which is that there are no bad ideas in a brainstorm. This is a safe place to just fling ideas on the wall, see what sticks, see what people like. One of the most common phrases that we hear in these brainstorming meetings, you might even hear today, Ted, feel free to steal this one, is, so this is a really bad idea, but, and then they throw out usually a really bad idea. It's usually not good. But the reason we do that and the value in that is that it might inspire somebody else to come up with something really cool, or somebody else might take that idea and roll with it. Like we were saying, this is a super collaborative process. So you just want to throw everything out there. So the things that you hear us saying up there, we know that not all of it is great. That's why we're here. And last but not least, like we mentioned, we've never talked about this water elemental before. We don't know what he's going to do. This is all on the fly. This is all off the cuff. So with that said, let's start talking. What do we got?
So you said that this is summoned by the sea priest. Is he going to be, do we want him to be in the room when that happens? Do you want to see him like come out of the water in that epic reveal moment, or?
Oh, definitely. Up to us whether we want him to actually be in the room during the fight or not, doing kind of a background lead up sort of thing, but definitely want to pay off that big moment of the head sea priest channeling all of his power and raising the ocean itself into our boss.
I think we kind of want to use the sea priest guy for later, so I want to keep the focus on the water elemental itself.
Okay.
You can see him in the background, like maybe he's on the bridge, like the one that we have to cross after we beat the boss. Maybe he's back when he summoned it, and then he just pieces out and fades away into the darkness.
Just like a reveal. So does that mean that the room is flooded if the water elemental is coming out of something? Like, doesn't have to be like at least like knee-deep water?
That's a good point. We should probably figure out the room, huh? We have this layout, but that doesn't mean like, I mean, we had the picture earlier where we were like chest high on him. Does that mean we're playing against torso boss, or does that mean
then it's really hard to see like area denial on the ground.
Then again, we can always change that. He's whatever we want him to be. Like, he could be in the middle of this platform. He could be hanging off the side of it. It's whatever we want. So.
I mean, you have the water source on the side, so you can summon him out of the water onto the platform. The size or his mobility, Immersius obviously comes to mind, a very iconic water elemental boss. But it seems to me like it's a pretty large platform there. It's something you can probably play with a lot in terms of where the boss spawns. Maybe he is immobile, but maybe he can kind of go into the ground, out of the ground in different areas too.
So here's a bad idea. What if whenever he's in physical form and you can actually punch him in the watery face, there's no water in the room, but whenever he submerges, he just like floods the room and now you're like swimming or something. Or like there's like a different threat that comes out, like sharks or piranhas or squid or something can finally like come out of the ocean.
Ken knows a thing or two about that.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Something that's cool about a water elemental like this is it can have a lot of different shapes. Like it actually could turn into a wave that washes over the platform, and it could play into what Ted was talking about of like maybe he starts out off the cliffside. He is so large that you're fighting him from the waist up, but then he turns in a wave and crashes onto the play space, and now maybe there's more than one of them. Or
the way I see it from kind of the player fantasy going in, there's that this guy's trying to defend this temple, trying to defend this dungeon, make sure nobody gets through that door and see kind of what's going on. And you guys have this idea where it's on the cliff side, so it makes sense to me to have a water elemental boss that's literally trying to wash you off the side of the cliff. So maybe there's a kind of wave thing you guys can do where if players don't move out of the way and they're going off the side of the cliff.
No, that's totally cool. We've done that in the past in like the Alakir fight. It was a big elemental guy on a platform, and if you got pushed off, it wasn't game over for you. You didn't necessarily die. We just gave you a very flashy return back to the platform that just so happened to take you out of the game for like 12 seconds as like a punishment, but not necessarily game over. That's totally something we can do here.
A dolphin could rescue you.
Huh?
A dolphin could rescue you.
Heck yeah. Flying dolphins.
What was the Shadow and Burial
Yeah.
boss? He was like trying to pull you off the platform though. This guy could be like splashing you with water, trying to blast you off of it though, like just the inverse of it. But it's kind of what you would expect a water elemental to do.
Yeah, and so I guess another big question is, most of our water elemental bosses that look like this have been sessile, which means they can't move. Is that a direction we want to go here? Do we want them to just like submerge and show up somewhere else like Raiden, or do we want him to actually be mobile if the room is flooded with water? Like, can we get like a cool like evocative anime of him walking around the water,
just scooting.
or just skating around?
I think it could be cool. Like, I really like Ted's idea about flooding the room and doing the water thing. You could almost imagine an A/B alternating sort of thing of he's against the cliff, he's very large, he's very imposing, and when the area is covered in water, now he has that kind of, it's his element, so to speak, right? And he can actually move around and come after you. Maybe he's a wave, maybe it's his model, he scales down some. There's lots of options there.
I think we should try to avoid the waist up boss for this one. Usually when we do that, it's like, when you think of just scale, right? If you think of bosses that are that size in a dungeon, you think of Helya, you think of Wrath of Ajara, like those are always the end boss. Because if we start with a boss that's this big, we're gonna be punching like the pinky toe of our last boss if we wanna make it not feel less epic for the last boss. So I think with this guy, we wanna go something not waist up. Maybe it is a mobile version, like if we actually got like, I'd have to think about what animations Immersius has, but like he looks like the Warcraft 3 water elemental, right? Who's just like kind of scoots around.
Yeah, scooting, that's a good word for it. What if, so do we want it to just be this one elemental, or the cool thing about water is that it can just sort of disperse and it can become whatever it wants to. We want to do the thing where like it splits into 2 and then you can like cleave it, and then it splits into 4, and then you can start AoEing it and go crazy.
Kind of like how Tectus ran.
Yeah.
Was that Tectus?
Well, Tectus would you'd get him down and he'd split into 2 guys.
Yeah, he like kept duplicating. That was cool. And the mechanics were even duplicating also. That'd be pretty sweet.
That could be part of the AB phase structure, or that could be like a phase C, like a bonus phase where you don't necessarily get a damage buff, but just by virtue of being able to AoE, you're doing more damage to him before he like reconvenes in some kind of way.
So you just dropped a few buzzwords there in terms of phase structure. You want to explain that a little bit?
Sure. So like Johnny was saying, there's like an A-B phase structure, which means that he'll do one thing. He'll have like one set of abilities. He'll have one set, like he'll be in his one form, and then he'll shift over to phase B, but then eventually return back to phase A, and then it'll just keep cycling through the fight. And then like a phase C might be like you go through phase A and phase B enough, and then he gets low health, and then he stops going through phase A and B, and then you get a bonus phase C or something like that.
I was just actually thinking about the Tectus idea plus the like pushing you off idea. It'd be kind of neat too, because with one, it would be like push you at like 3 yards a second. But as you get more and more of them, the force, like more of them are pushing us back to be kind of cool. Or maybe just like only one person is pushed at the start, and then towards the end, if there's 3 of them or 4 of them by then, like all of us are getting pushed back by then.
I do really like how that, playing off of Tectus and playing off of some of those other elemental bosses we've done before, and I think paying that minor homage to Immersius, right, with the splitting, the iconic thing that he did. I think the thing I really like is it's really chasing after that fantasy of fighting the ocean, right? We've all been kids and tried to build a sandcastle on the beach. So this will never fall down. I spent all day on it, and then inevitably it does, right? That keeping the boss's abilities potentially on the simpler side, but them stacking and multiplying against you, and that feeling of being, that race to bring him down before he can multiply enough to bring you down. There's something really cool about that, about capturing that fantasy.
It's also not splitting into lots of little droplets that reform.
Right, it gives it a different flavor than what we've seen before, but it is consistent.
And it doesn't have to be droplets. It could just be smaller versions of himself. He could just be like he's everywhere. He's like the reflection of the ocean. He's in all places at all times. And maybe like you DPS one down and it bursts into water, and then something drops its heart, or who knows, its shackles. Does it have like the classic water elemental bindings of the? Oh, it does. Ooh,
well, he was
tentacles.
summoned, right? So
I think what's really unique about this guy is he has those kind of Cthulhu chinticles, as you call them, going on. So there's definitely this kind of, from a player side feeling, whatever we know, that there's this kind of you know, void, old, gaudy kind of presence going on here because of just the way he's structured. And then one of the key pieces we saw earlier was there was that just tiny person on the cliffside fending. It almost even looked like they were just attacking him, ready to stab him with those chin things.
Yeah, so I can imagine that he actually like physically punches the tank. He's not like a caster that's water bolting. He's just like, ugh.
That's interesting. What if going with the chinticles and the idea of like the shadow as well as water idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we've just been focusing on water. Ted brings up a good point, which is we potentially could play off the shadow kid if we're saying that this guy's some form of corruption or something, but like maybe he's using both water and shadow, right? But then as he's splitting, potentially the water is getting more powerful and the shadow, like something's getting diluted there, right? It's probably not the water because he's just splitting, but maybe the shadow ability that he's using is getting weaker as the water ability is getting stronger or something like that.
Interesting. Or also riffing off of that, what if what you're actually killing is like the corruption, and there's like a dark something in some of the water elementals, and you have to hack through the elementals to find out whether or not they have that corrupted core, or whether they have like that magic nugget or whatever it is that the priest was like, take this.
Like the XT heart just falls.
Yeah. Like,
Well, the shackles that are on the water elemental are, that could be the source of its corruption.
yeah, that could be kind of cool.
You wouldn't want to actually punch bracers, but the idea would be like to break the crystal that's in the side of his bracer.
Yeah, maybe that like dispels the illusion or whatever it is that's making the water elemental what it is.
Maybe he can't reform once it's destroyed, and so like maybe you're killing him over and over and over again, but it's destroying the bracers that ultimately beats the fight.
It's like a shell game where there's just infinite ones of them spawning, and you have to keep finding the one that has the bracers on it to kill the one with the bracers, and you're just getting like overwhelmed, and it's splitting, and you don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden they just wash you off the platform.
So the damage you put into the non-bracers one, they just kind of fall down into puddles of water and come back into the
Yeah, that's awesome. Or like when you kill them, they deal splash damage.
No.
Don't encourage her.
I got a million of them. I got wave event, I got soap mechanic, I got this all day.
So funny.
Just don't talk about soap.
So if we did want to do a C phase, kind of riffing off that idea of finding the corruption, that might be a little bit long for a first boss, but maybe once you do find that source of corruption, right, it reveals its true form or envelops it completely in shadow or something like that, and you get that last burn phase of a void elemental sort of thing, or a void walker sort of thing, and there could be something cool there.
I don't know if we need to do A, B, and C for the first boss. I think just doing the A split apart B thing is kind of cool for this guy.
So would there be some kind of, I know it's really satisfying for players a lot of the time, and we had a few instances in Seed of Triumvirate now where there's a kind of big damage intake phase, 200% increased damage, or you get some kind of buff or something. It's usually pretty satisfying, especially for the DPS to have that kind of thing. So I feel like there might be room on this fight to do something with the water theme and, I don't know, air bubbles, whatever it may be, to have that kind of thing.
You could do the kind of thing where you have to pace your DPS, because if you burst one of the elemental adds, then it does do AoE splash damage, as it were. And so if you kill too many at once, then you just wipe, that.
So I missed a part. We're not doing Tectus 1 to 2, 2 to 4. There's
Could be anything.
tons of little ads.
I think that still works. The Tectus 1 to 2, 2 to 4, it's just one of them keeps the bracers.
Or sometimes two of them have the bracers, or you just have to seek them out, and there's like waves coming at you. It's like hard to see. You could even give them that screen effect, like whenever you're invisible. Sometimes like maybe you're drowning or something, it's hard for you to see. Like not all the time, obviously, but he afflicts you with Curse of the Ocean, drowning or something.
Maybe to riff off of the thing we were talking about earlier, the one with the bracers could be getting more and more like shadowed out, basically, or voided out, like you said. So at the end, like maybe the Chinticle thing, he's not that at first. He's just a good old water elemental. But then after he splits the first time, the one with the bracers gets more shadowed out because some of the water left and form these little ads, and then he gets Chinticles or something. Maybe there's a third version of him that is there a character artist? It's fine. There's a third version of him where like he becomes purple and more shadowed out, basically.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You could just change his color and just gradually becomes more purple. That'd be pretty cool to see.
You can even do a cool.
I'm kind of curious. So you're starting with a piece of concept art. You're riffing off of that, but do your ideas cause you to go back to the drawing board and actually reinvent the boss a little bit? Like you talked about, hey, can we have a character artist change this boss a bit?
Yeah, you know, often we're given a piece of concept like this to work with, which is fantastic. I don't think they've created this yet either, so when we do these brainstorms like this, oftentimes we can just come up with new or other ideas, and oftentimes at Blizzard, when you're geeked up enough about an idea, if you can sell someone on how cool this idea is, they're more than happy to make it for us. So in a case like this, if we're like, hey, as well as this guy, what if there was a purple guy? Because we have this really cool idea for the boss with all these mechanics will play into that. They're like, yeah, totally, we got you. So we try not to let, you know, that kind of production-related thing get into the brainstorming process too much, because we just want to come up with the best idea we can.
This isn't like mechanic head. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just mentioning, it'd be cool, like, we have the idea of him transforming into more and more evil versions. It'd be cool, since we're on the side of the river, of seeing the actual good water of him whenever you phase transitions come out and like flow into the
Ben kaçtım,
get
görüşürüz.
away from him.
Yeah, or maybe he goes off the bluff's edge and he just becomes enormous or something like that while you're dealing with the little ones. So I just had a thought of like, just kind of a cool visual moment. It's not like a neat mechanic, but like he has this anim where he like makes the water rise and it like the orbs of water are coming out like globules or something, and he's just like, kind of like in Fantasia whenever Mickey's doing like the, or like a Hadouken, you know, like a really get it out there, you know, like, sorry.
So it sounds like this guy actually ends up being more of a Void Walker, right?
By the end, you mean?
So he starts as a water elemental and you're slowly siphoning him off to be a Void Walker at the end of the fight.
Sure.
Just visually, I'm trying to think what that would...
Sounds like that's, I mean, they both have the same cuff motif. They're kind of controlled by something.
Totally.
Is there a way we could make the shadow and water kind of work together in some way? Like, to me, that would be the most interesting thing, is if the shadow, like, almost was, like, opposed to the water, or if they interacted in some way that made the mechanics more interesting.
It'd be the kind of thing where if you touch bad water, you get debuffed by shadow or something, like you're impure or you're unclean in some kind of way. Is that part of the Sea Priest kit? Do they manipulate light and shadow, or like what? Are they just like nautical themed?
It's definitely leaning very much on the nautical theme. I think if they did some of the light shadow stuff, it wouldn't be completely inappropriate.
Okay.
But I think doubling down on the storm water theme makes a lot of sense, especially going into that later boss that Scott was talking about where they're like cleansing themselves. There's something cool about they have some way to get rid of the shadow, but I think they would get rid of it in some way that feels nautical.
Okay.
The thing you mentioned about the unclean debuff, you could have the like pools of clean water, and actually walking into them removes that.
Yeah.
But then you've created a pool of bad water, and maybe that's what animates it as a shadowy apparition or something like that. Like,
Sorry, unrelated, but I just had a random idea. There's a boat, and there's a channel, and there are boats. Would we be able to get them involved somehow? Like, or would that be worth discussing?
They're like shooting their cannons at you.
I don't
as
know,
they drive
maybe,
by?
yeah. I mean,
Like on heroic mode, one just comes over and bombards you for no freaking reason
Exactly.
whatsoever, and just like, hey, F you.
Mythic mechanic, maybe? Bunch of cannonballs shooting on the side of the platform, get worse and worse, those kind of soft enrage style.
Tyrannical boats.
That could be cool.
This is probably a good time for us to just sort of take stock of what you've heard so far. How much of this is kind of sticking with you? What do you want to roll with from this point, Ken?
I think some AB phase version of the fight works out pretty well here. One where he's the big water elemental with the bracers, and after you do some amount of damage or some mechanic to him, he'll break up into a couple different pieces. One of them is the real one with the bracers that you're fighting, and then after you maybe get his health low, they'll reform up into the big guy. Each time he'll reform up into the big guy, he'll get a little more shadowier than before. Maybe go back and forth a couple times before the fight ends.
What do you think of Morgan's idea at the end there of rolling in the boat and the cannons?
I think if we were to use the boat, probably be for Heroic Plus. I just worry a little bit about diluting the theme of the guy with the boat.
So I'm kind of curious. This sounds awesome. Sounds very ambitious. Where do you start to draw the line? Where do you say, okay, this is too much for a dungeon. This is the kind of stuff we might save for a raid.
So far what we have doesn't scare me that much. So one of the things that we always try to consider with dungeon bosses is just how much time players get to spend with them, right? So with a dungeon boss, we expect it to really only last like a couple minutes, like two plus-ish minutes. With a raid boss, we're talking about like many minutes, from 6 to on up. So we know that there's a lot more time to let mechanics as well as additional phases breathe. So we have often done like A/B bosses, like where we go from one phase to the next, back to the next, or even just, at 50% health, trigger the next thing, right? That's usually where we try to stop the complexity level for a dungeon boss. So this is pushing it, but I think we're okay.
We also don't want to overload you with mechanics. I think that the rule of 3 is a good number for game design, where you don't want to have someone have more than 3 things in their mind at once. Like, what is my objective? What am I dodging? What else could possibly play off of that? And that's about as far as you want to go for the casual but the 5-man, possibly pub group mechanic.
And when do you start incorporating, the different roles? Like, hey, what's the tank doing? What are the healers doing? What's melee? What's range doing?
I think that would be like what Ken does. So the way that we describe this sometimes is whenever they do the dungeon layout and they're trying to figure out like who's in the dungeon, you write the 1-sentence version of what this boss is. And then when we sit down and we have this meeting, we come up with the 1-paragraph version of what the boss is. So we say like, okay, it's a water elemental, but also it splits into 3 and it's pushing you off the side. But then Ken would take everything that we're just sort of like vomiting out on stage right now and then turn that into a 1-page design where he decides like, okay, now how is this meaningful to the tank, and how are we making sure we're doing enough damage to keep the healer engaged? We can come up with some cool ideas on how to kit that and how to theme that, but ultimately that would be up to Ken.
So he's boxed you in a little bit now. So you want to spend a little bit more time kind of working within that box?
So no boats.
No boats. Maybe heroic. There's life.
Maybe.
Maybe. It'll happen maybe.
Heroic boats.
Cool. So we've got, so you're saying you think when the water splits off, they're going to reform, or is that just ads that we kill and then the water's gone and he's more corrupted now?
Potentially it's just ads that you kill that come back in form back into the main guy. We could even have it split more than once. The way I was thinking in my head is he's the normal water elemental. He'll split once and then he'll be the evil version of the water elemental. So you only have like A, B, A, then you're done.
Right.
So are you thinking that every time he splits, he comes back and he has less health, and that's how you know that you're progressing on the boss? Or when he turns into the shadow version, is he like a new one with 100% health?
I think you just keep the same health bar the whole time.
Okay.
So when you get him down to say 50, he'll split into him and his buddy essentially, or even more than one buddy. You kill them, he comes back at 50 or whatever damage you've done to him in the meantime.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting, because then that can be one of those things in Mythic Plus when you're really pushing those keystones, like how many times he submerges can be what pushes you over the edge of killing this boss on time.
So what's the mechanic then to have to kill his buddies? Does he just go immune? Do they take double damage from the cleave? We never really decided, are they immobile or not?
I think we went for he's moving around. As to going immune, typically that doesn't really, or it's hard to make that feel good when players have to switch over because the main guy that you're watching the life bar of goes immune. It could even be something like the side guys just do the exact same abilities as the boss, so that's why you want to get rid of them, because they have much less health and they're presenting their own threats in some way.
Are you thinking the watery Hadoken, or are you gonna pass?
I'm okay with that.
The pushback thing?
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
It's pretty
He
cool.
could even do the thing we were talking about before, where he transforms into a wave, goes across the play space, and then comes back up as a water elemental. That way, when you've got like 2 or 4 of them, it's threatening in its own way.
I'm curious. This guy, do you think that he talks? Do you think that he'd like be smack talking to you the whole time, or is he just kind of like this mindless, aberrant horror that's just I kill?
We've done both treatments of elementals before, but I personally kind of prefer it when we give them that voice, give them that personality. It can be kind of that raw, powerful, angry sort of vibe that we've seen with Tectis, right? Tectis isn't exactly going out to write a novel, or the Wrath of Ajara, or some of those other elemental bosses, right?
Sure.
But I do think it's cool to have him talk, and I think there's a cool opportunity there as he becomes more shadow, as he's revealing his true form, right? We can kind of have his voice modulate over time, so those sound lines that he's saying or the abilities that he's doing can take on some of that shadowy effect. If you think back to Yogg-Saron, right, when he's revealing his true form, spoilers, at the heart of Ulduar, right? That voice transition is a super awesome moment.
Would you say that the water elemental's voice is deep?
Yes.
We never have any puns in anything that we do in World of Warcraft, by the way.
It was a nice career for a while, so you guys fired Monday.
Morgan, I had an idea to keep the boats.
Oh, I'm in.
Just hear me out here. I like the boats. If players get washed off by the waves, right? I'm assuming it's the wave mechanic is actually what would knock players off.
Yeah.
They get brought back onto the platform by the boats. They get shot out of a cannon back there.
Or someone fishes
like
them up
like
out
a
of the water.
circus.
Yeah.
Like the Colterans are just like, hey, and then they shoot you in a cannon back onto the... Yeah. That could be a cool way to hit what is basically just a stun mechanic.
Right. And maybe fighting this guy, or facing that guardian is kind of their ultimate, their rights, right? And you can't enter their sanctum, and that's part of the story that we're trying to sell in the zone. Is this is a place where nobody goes except for sea priests, and so we could tie it into conquering that passing that as their test to enter their sanctum.
That's cool. Yeah, because we can't just death touch you or kill you instantly for getting knocked off. It's a dungeon, first boss in the dungeon, no less. It should feel like a timeout. Here you go, sit in the corner, jump in the cannon, get back up. All right, you're back in the fight.
I mean, we can. We just be big jerks.
Right. You could always do the water spout, but you could also do a ship.
Yeah. He could pick the boat up and throw it at you.
With his tentacles.
Going on that a little bit, I kind of like
Burak,
the idea of maybe he leans
Mythic
forward
Plus
and
için
slams face down,
isim
grabs
yapayım
one
dedim
person
de
with his
orada
tentacles
hektik
and,
et klibi
sort of
seçtim ya.
swallows them inside the
Yani
his
en
water
yakın o
chest,
geldi
and you
bana.
have to save the guy by punching him out. And that's threatening in its own way because if he splits into multiple guys, then
He has
bad
these
times.
two perfectly good hands, but he's just like, I'm gonna get you. I love it.
It's way creepier. Come on.
It's totally creepy.
Maybe he puts his hands down next to you and then bites you.
When you're saying putting his hands down, it just kind of, I don't want to completely redesign the fight now, but because the bracers are kind of that soft spot or what he's enchanted, it's an opportunity for him to slam his hands down and maybe get a bit of extra damage in. Maybe he takes a damage multiplier on his bracers. And when he does that, his chinticles, because it's water and stuff, kind of can go in the ground, and those are your void zones that you avoid. Or you could turn it into a soak mechanic. We all love that. It's up to you. But
I knew it was going to happen.
So now you're the last panel ever, apparently. But so there's just definitely an idea there with the tentacles, and I just like focusing on that because that art is amazing. It looks great, and they're just so obvious on his face, so menacing. So we need to see those in play somehow.
It could be the kind of thing where the tentacles, maybe they don't necessarily he leans over and picks them up, but it's the kind of thing where it's like a spiraling water looking thing, right? And they spiral back down into if you're standing in water. I haven't decided. Have we decided if the room is chest high, knee highs, or any water in the room besides him?
I think it's just a solid dry platform above the river itself.
Okay, because I was thinking they could turn into friggin' chin tornadoes and go down into the water and then funnel you up out of the water and then just it was just a thought.
Changing subjects, we haven't talked about Shadow at all.
Right.
We really like the chinticles, but if he's going to do Shadow stuff, we should probably figure out what that is, right? I think something that Scott mentioned that was a really cool idea is if we're doing the Hadoken, push you off the platform, can we somehow put shadow stuff on the ground? Maybe it snares you so that you can use it to not get pushed off, or it stuns you or something if you touch it, but you want to get stunned so you don't get pushed off, or something weird, or I don't know.
The Bone Maw fight in Shadowman Burial Grounds was kind of he's trying to suck you in like Kirby, and what you want to do is stand in the goo, because the goo makes you sticky and then you don't get sucked in. Could be the opposite thing where there's a shadow puddle on the ground and you're immobile or something like that. When he pushes you off, it's well, would you rather get pushed off or would you rather take some shadow damage? It's let them decide.
It seems weird from a fantasy perspective for the player that you want to be standing in the evil shadow stuff. So instead of something that'll help you get pushed against the wave, maybe there are gaps in the wave that you could naturally dodge, but touching one of those puddles actually amplifies the wave pushing you. So it's a punishment rather than a savior. It just seems kind of weird that, evil shadow stuff, I should go stand in it.
Interesting. Do you imagine that one of his primary attacks that's just like doing damage to the raid would be Shadow, or do you think that it would mostly be water?
I think a cool flavoring thing is like it could be water at the beginning, and then when he transforms, it turns into Shadow.
That's cool.
To Ted's point, you could do something, since we got tentacles, you can get the water version, or shadowy version of like, maybe something actually grabs you, like physically grabs you. That could be interesting. Like maybe it's even a big wind up, like Ted, you're gonna get pushed off the platform and you wanna go jump on something or get grabbed by something, one of the tentacles maybe, to not get knocked off, or I don't know, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what is the shadow part of the guy. Since we have lots of really strong themes and kit ideas for the water, what's the shadow?
It kind of depends right now because I guess everyone's kind of on board for this wave mechanic pushing you off, but there's some disparity right now between is it just going to be one big inevitable wave that comes through, or are there going to be several waves and you have to frogger your way through? And I mean, you can maybe get hit by one, it'll set you back a bit, but ultimately there's maybe 2 or 3 layers that you have to dodge in order to get back to the platform or be safe.
I think splitting those up into 2 different abilities or mechanics is kind of the way to go here. One would be the waves that kind of go across and you dodge them or you take a bunch of damage, and another is kind of like a water jet that he channels on you, that's, shooting streams of water trying to push you towards the edge.
So would just him be shooting it, or when he splits, we'd have 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them?
Absolutely. You could have a bunch of them channeling on a bunch of different random people, pushing them towards the edge.
So it's like a bullet hell of waves where you're trying to dodge all the bullets, but then when he splits, there's even more of them, and it's your worst nightmare?
Yeah.
So would there be some inherent benefit to not killing those ads? Because I know when we think especially about Mythic Plus, it's all about there's some kind of risk reward and trying to be efficient, even if it's at the risk of perhaps wiping. So would there be some benefit to not having to kill the ads that he splits in, outside of saving some damage because you can funnel it directly into the boss? You know, the risk being, of course, the more there are, the more damage, the more people can get knocked off. But where's the benefit of not doing that? Or is there one? Should there be one?
Yeah, I agree. I'd have to think about it some more, but I want to lean towards the making killing the ads a bonus and really want to push that rather than let you just tunnel the boss and ignore everything else on the side.
You could do the thing where if you kill one of them, then that's like part of his health, right? So every one of them that you kill is like 5% off of his health, and he could just have an enormous amount of health. And like, I don't know, that maybe that doesn't feel good whenever you're punching him outside of that phase though. Like you're hitting his hit points by like 1% every 6 minutes.
What if the water is normally considered like pure, right? Like holy in a sense? And there's a mechanic I really liked from Il'gynoth where you're taking the ads to the edge of the actual boss's domain and you're killing them there, so location actually matters.
Yeah.
There could be something cool where when the ads die, they explode, right? A big splash of water. And particularly the more voided out the main boss is, the more damage he takes from this holy water, and we kind of play off of that theme.
Oh, interesting. Like
maybe they always hurt him some, but like it's the closer they are to him, the more damage they're doing to him.
Like the water is the antithesis to the shadow?
Right, which could tie in really cool to kind of the rest of the dungeon and sell that like there's a stark difference between those 2 things.
Just trying to figure out a way to sell that mechanically in the fight.
Right.
It's cool.
Just something about that risk reward, right? Of like, oh, if they're both doing waves, having them close together is bad, but taking advantage of the extra damage could be like on Mythic Plus, that could be a great time savings if you have the skill to do that.
So the ads are mobile, right? The boss and the splitting and everything's mobile. They're not stationary.
Yeah, I imagine so.
So how, I mean, at the end of the day, then from a party perspective, the tank the proximity issue here is kind of weird if they're mobile, because what does the tank do? Just picks all of them up and you just AoE them down on top of the boss.
Maybe.
It could be the kind of thing where the boss is mobile, but the ads just choose not to. Like maybe they're casters, or maybe they're just busy, like channeling waves, or perhaps Hadokening you a couple of times. And then when the boss is out, he's actually kind of dangerous, and maybe he can even walk around during that phase and punch you and be dangerous in some kind of way.
Yeah, I don't.
Like
I
a
like that
minefield of his own elementals, a minefield of his own spawn.
Where they're all probably just channeling, right? But then if you have a blood DK or whatever, good for you. You can gore fiends them all together. So like, if you're on your blood DK that day, yes, you can do that. But otherwise, they're probably just channeling on a bunch of people. which makes
Do
sense.
you try to work in any kind of class specifics? Like you just mentioned, if you had a DK there.
Yeah.
I mean, you go through each of the classes and think about, okay, what would happen if we, happen to have a hunter or we had a demon hunter in here?
Yeah, with dungeons in particular, we're always we try to let everything fly and let as many things work as we can. Especially when we're coming up with things for dungeons, we try to find ways to have multiple solutions for a problem. So maybe there's like an ad that has a lot of health, but you could purge it to kill it, or if you don't have a purge, you can just punch it. But we often try to think of it from the perspective of like giving you multiple solutions to the problem where possible. A lot of that stuff also comes from feedback and play tests, and we're like, hey, that was really hard without X. Okay, well, how do we like incorporate some other way to solve that problem?
So I know people are going to ask, every one of us plays, we all have our favorite class, and yet you're the evil minds behind these encounters. How do you make sure that you aren't having some sort of favoritism towards your own classes?
The people sitting here will all play different things as well. So usually we're pretty good about saying like, hey, that's really mean to melee. I'm gonna give you feedback. That's really mean to melee. Please keep that in mind, even though you might not be that specific with a certain spec or something like that. So really we just lean on each other for that kind of feedback, and also the community, and where we get no lack of feedback in that regard.
And that's also the kind of thing that we can iron out. Like even if we don't somehow perfectly design the boss the first time, once we're playtesting it ourselves, we have the melees, we have the casters, we have all sorts of comps that we try. And if something doesn't work out, we're not afraid to just scrap it and start over.
So we're probably at the point where you need to make some decisions. I'd like to give Ted an opportunity to sort of voice in community perspective on what we've figured out here. So you want to kind of sum it up? Actually, all of you can kind of weigh in. Where are we? What is this boss all about?
Which ideas do you like the most?
Ken, you have to make it. What are you thinking?
I like the idea of that we originally hit on with the AB. He's got maybe 3 abilities or so in A phase. When you do get him down to 50, or maybe it's timed, we can do it by the energy bar and show his like water power underneath his health. He'll split into a couple dudes. Potentially just 2, but maybe more if we want to get crazy, maybe in Heroic Plus. But they all share his abilities, and when you damage them, it somehow damages him either by copying their damage onto him, or they explode and you have to bring him over, that sort of thing. After you deal with all of those, he'll reform back up into his main guy at whatever amount of health. You'll bring him down to 0 and win, hopefully.
Ideally.
Hopefully.
Okay. Ted, what do you think? Feedback?
I was kidding. I mean, it sounds great. No, there's obviously there's always a bit of a disconnect between how you guys imagine things and what the players end up finding at home. It could be bugs, could be just something didn't come to image. I guess maybe a couple of concerns that stick out for this fight, and definitely feel free to chime in how you guys deal with these challenges, designing bosses in general, because so for this one, for instance, it's kind of a role-specific, more of a role-specific concern. Definitely, huge advantage here with bringing a multi-dot class. If we're going to have a bunch of ads that are initially immobile. If you have a DK, great. What if you don't have a DK? Are we going to be able to silence the mobs to bring them in or not? Is it just going to turn into a cleave fest? And is there going to be RNG for where the ads spawn? Third boss seat of Triumvirate comes to mind right now. There's definitely a lot of RNG and frustration sometimes in where those tentacles spawn. That really kind of makes it very unattractive, honestly, to bring melee. So then melee players get frustrated, especially when they're trying to compete in higher Mythic Plus dungeons. So how would you guys try to approach some of those concerns for this?
So when we're talking about things like roles, for instance, in dungeons, one of the things we often think about and discuss when we're talking about dungeon bosses in particular is we think of a dungeon as a whole the same way that we might think of an individual raid boss, right? So where on an individual raid boss, some of those concerns that you brought up, it would just, what's my answer? Like, what if I'm not so great on this fight? Well, the answer there is not as fun as it might be in a dungeon where you can just say, yeah, well, don't worry, the next boss, that's where you get to shine. So when we talk about dungeon bosses in particular, we always try to think of it as like, okay, this is a really tank heavy, like a tank mechanic heavy boss, right? This is one where the tank and the healer are going to carry us through this. It might not have as much for a DPS in particular, but then maybe the boss right after that will, right? As long as we hit all those beats, and sometimes it's even good to have those peaks and valleys for an individual where it's like, okay, that boss is really hard for me. Okay, cool, this next boss, Scott and Ken are going to carry me because they're the DPS and they're going to be killing all the ads, it's not as difficult for me. So that's usually how we think of a dungeon versus a raid in particular.
Okay. So what's the healer doing on this fight? We didn't really talk about it. I mean, as the tank, I can kind of see a situation where maybe you want to move the boss a bit, or maybe you can kind of, players always discover things like, let's tank the boss against the wall, because it eliminates 180 degrees of where those ads can spawn, unless you guys predetermine the ads to spawn somewhere in the room. So I can see some tank mobility going on. It'll crush the tank, because it's this big behemoth water guy. DPS obviously important. They want to get those water images down, make sure that there's not too much damage, but what's the healer doing the whole time outside of healing the tank? It seems like we haven't really decided. I mean, is there going to be some kind of damage on the raid, some kind of dot going on, or is the healer just going to be spamming Wrath for minor amounts of damage in the meantime?
It's very likely that there's going to be some sort of party damage going on, whether that comes in the form of he randomly targets a person and water bolts them or something. This is kind of like the thing we talked about where whatever he's spamming the party with, after the transition, it turns into shadow from water. So could be easy as a random targeted water bolt, or it could be just like he slams the ground, water hits everyone.
Okay. There's also that whole shadow side of it. We never really nailed down something that we were super happy about, but I think that's still a strong theme here. And often shadow has to do a lot with healing, like whether it be healing reduction effects or healing absorb effects, or even just something as simple as like a dot, right? You could say that dot is really weak at the beginning of the fight, or it's not super damaging at the beginning of the fight, but then as he gets more and more powerful, maybe it hits more targets. So by the end of the fight, your healer's just like, oh my god, whack-a-mole. So that's things like that. I think are still things that, like Kenneth mentioned, when we get to the like one paragraph version of this boss, that's a thing we'll dive a lot deeper on.
Okay. So I guess kind of in that same vein, there's always a concern of, I mean, there's such a wide range of mobility between the different classes and roles themselves. And with this kind of wave mechanic of getting pushed back, right? Some classes will just have an advantage, bring a Guardian Druid, they can roar through them, Hunters disengage with them, Mages blink, etc., etc. Whereas the poor DK and priests in the background are slowly drowning and getting pushed away. See you guys later. But so where do you, I mean, you'll never be able to design a fight that satisfies everything. It's just impossible. But where do you guys, especially for a first dungeon boss, where do you kind of draw the line on what's okay? Like, what is too much that we're really making those low mobility classes suffer a bit too much here? Or we're letting, things like Guardian Druids, whatever, shine a bit too much maybe? Like, where do you draw that line for these kind of encounters?
I think for dungeons, it's just a question of, is it mandatory or not? Like, is it a bonus that I can run and that I don't have to hit my W button to stay going forward as much? Or is it just guaranteed gonna throw me off the ledge if I don't have a run speed buff? Like, obviously, that's just kind of like a tuning knob where you decide whether or not, moving is a bonus or if it's necessary.
Yeah, we're always looking for ways to make it feel like really good about having a specific class with you, especially with mechanics. But not only that, like with the dungeon, we have all kinds of opportunities to fit that kind of thing in. Like with Court of Stars was a dungeon that we were experimenting with a lot in terms of like how much class and profession and different mechanics can we put in to make people feel really cool about what they can bring to the fight. So that's always a place where we're looking to have opportunities there. Like Candace said, with the dungeon, I don't think we would ever consider it like mandatory that a thing is there. It would just be like, cool, if you have this, you can skip this ads phase, or if you have this, you can, CC those ads until we kill the boss, and that saves us a little bit of efficiency.
Cool. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned Court of Stars, just kind of, not really off topic because it's related to dungeons, but was that kind of model or experiment, was that successful in your guys' mind? Is that the kind of thing you might want to explore going forward? Because it certainly added a pretty cool, unique flavor on a dungeon that we usually don't see. Because dungeons in a lot of players' heads are, well, you start, there's trash, you kill a boss, there's trash, you kill a boss. So it's cool to see this kind of twist. Do you guys, is that something you might work on in the future and try to have some different mechanics in the dungeons themselves?
I thought Court of Stars was very successful, and it's a really fun dungeon, and we use it as a reference for dungeons we're talking about in Battle for Azeroth, of like, how can we incorporate those kind of things? Obviously we have to consider like Mythic Plus runs and what happens to the group where no one knows what's going on, and are they able to be successful still, but I think it was good.
Cool. So I guess more in your territory than Johnny. In terms of lore and aesthetics, some players don't care. I care though. I like going in a room and feeling like I'm in this shadow-corrupted water ledge and things are really dangerous. So how important is it for you guys to kind of develop these environments, you know, really well for the players to go in and be like, wow. I mean, we've just done a ton of Antaurus testing now for the BTR, just kind of as an example leading into this. And going on Agrimar's platform was just mind-blowing. Or going upstairs to Argus was like, oh, this just looks awesome. I don't even care if the fight's like really bad. This is just great, you know? Not that the fight is bad, I'm just saying. So how much attention do you guys pay to these kind of environments so the players really feel, I mean, this is a role-playing game at the end of the day. Players really want to feel like they're invested in the environment and that it's cool in a creepy environment, whatever it may be. So in this case, it would have to be this kind of, you know, ledge with water and wind, and you feel like really unstable. So how much do you guys pay attention to that?
We actually pay an immense amount of attention to that, but both in our dungeons and in the outdoor world too, right? It really takes the entire development team to really sell that fantasy, right? Like you mentioned, we're a role-playing game, and we've been talking a lot recently as we're developing Battle for Azeroth about how do we make sure that we're always capturing that fantasy, that I am playing this class and I'm in this world, and this world is a real place and feels real, and it has its own problems and things I care about, right? So it kind of varies on the specific situation, but it can be as simple as the dungeon artist that made Agrimar's room made it just super incredible, right? Or the character artist that made this boss here just made the shinticles so incredibly intricate and they wrap around so interestingly that you can't look away from it, right? But it's something that we think about a lot. And for all those people out there that don't read quest text, or they're not caring what the story is necessarily, it's just not their thing, that's completely cool, because our job as storytellers at the end of the day is that you cannot help but understand what's going on. The goal is that if you're listening to music and talking to your friends and all those wonderful things that we do while we're enjoying games and playing World of Warcraft, you can't help but notice what's going on. You can't help but be like, man, that room was really cool. What was that guy again? Who is that? Who's Agrimar? And then you go on the best 6-hour journey of your life figuring out all the answers to that. So hopefully,
six is hopeful.
You can't help but absorb what's going on. Like there's like some ocean stuff happening, and I'm pretty sure that those dudes like betrayed those other dudes. What was that all about? And that's totally enough for us.
Cool. So this is we probably need to draw the brainstorm to an end. I really appreciate all of you doing this. I know that we would normally have a lot of meetings, and you do this over many hours to decide what the mechanics are. And certainly we haven't had to do this in front of a large crowd, so that's awesome, because they really did not rehearse this boss at all, so these ideas were raw. But thank you so much. I'm curious though, I think everyone wants to know, what happens next? Once you figure this out, what's the next step?
Yeah, so we usually have a couple of these meetings where we talk about individual bosses or dungeon bosses and mechanics like this. At that point, we then hand it off to Ken, who will go work on what we call a paper design, which is where he really just takes, anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days to just work out all the details about what this boss is going to be doing, what each role is going to do, what all the mechanics are. At that point, he sends out an email to the team, and we send feedback back. We iterate on that quite a bit up until the point where you're ready to start implementing and putting it in the game, and then we can play test it and get it into our community's hands and go from there.
Very cool. So we're gonna bring this to an end. Some of us are gonna hang out over by the arch there at Darkmoon Fair if you want to ask questions or have some comments. With any luck, everything we talked about tonight will be in that dungeon boss exactly as we described it with no changes. But there might be a few changes, but you can be rest assured that you helped us put together a cool boss tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for attending the World of Warcraft Boss Design Workshop panel. Up next, closing ceremonies from the Mythic stage.